You need to create a bigger impact with what you have to say? This one is for you. Hi everyone, I'm Rob from Octily. Welcome to another episode of 5 Questions, 5 Answers, where we explore the thought processes of people making a real difference for the future of HR, learning and development, and workplace platforms. Today, I'm joined by 2 fantastic guests to talk about the art of data storytelling. Dylan Stokes, VP and Global Head of NIIT's HCM Technology Practice based in Canada, and Che Osborne, AVP of Ecosystems and Growth at Cornerstone OnDemand, dialing in from the UK. First of all, gentlemen, thank you for making the time.
Of course.
Now, let me introduce you two and set the stage real quick. I knew I had to bring Che and Dylan back together the moment I saw them in action during a recent partner bootcamp, the perfect prequel to the Cornerstone Spark in London. I was simply in awe of their ability to cut signal from noise, and their back and forth packed with data, insight, and beautifully wrapped in brilliant storytelling for business impact felt like watching a high-stakes tennis match, except they were actually on the same team, setting each other up for well-timed assists to elevate their evidence-based narratives. What we witnessed in London was an unexpected masterclass in how data becomes influence when paired with the right story. If we take his LinkedIn tagline at face value, Dylan is the ibuprofen for HR tech. He solves learning and HCM technology headaches with surgical precision and is probably one of the few people who actually gets excited when they hear the word compliance, right? Dylan is a UK-trained barrister, a multilingual strategist, and has worked across 30 different countries. He has led massive implementations and delivers clarity like few others. Oh, and of course, he was once captain of a paintball team, so I assume he was always this tactical, equipped with razor-sharp vision and fast on the trigger. Che, on the other hand, brings the big picture voice. He's a presence, eloquent and equipped with a storytelling style that makes data feel like a journey, not a lecture. He helps Cornerstone and its clients connecting the dots across platforms, people, and value, and his rare ability to turn insights into impact is exactly what inspired this interview. Additionally, Che and I share something that constantly challenges and expands our perspective on the world: wonderful teenage daughters. This gives us both a front row seat to how the next generation thinks, learns, and questions everything. It's eye-opening and humbling all at once. This episode is especially relevant for anyone trying to translate numbers into compelling stories, to create narratives based on evidence and metrics, while keeping your audience truly engaged. Whether you're presenting to executives or colleagues, it's about making your message land, turning data into decisions, and ultimately building a solid foundation for business strategies and outcomes. Now, let's hear from each of you. Dylan, is there anything I missed? Please give us a full picture on you and your role at NIIT.
No, I think that's a very good description, so thank you.
Wonderful. Then over to you, Che. What else should our listeners know about you and your strategic role at Cornerstone?
I'm super lucky. I get to work with many of our 7,000 global customers, and I've recently spent a lot of time on the road meeting with many of them, hearing the challenges they face and the problems they're trying to solve. And alongside that, one of the most important lessons is the power of our partners. People like Dylan and NIIT, these are organizations that help company execute against those challenges, leveraging the technology platforms that Cornerstone brings. And that's where we get the real power to solve problems that customers are trying to solve. So yeah, that's a good setup, I think, Robert. And definitely teenage daughters give you a very challenging view of the world, that's for sure. But they also keep us wise about what are the next generation thinking of things. You know, as we're in a position 5 generations in the workforce for the first time ever and more to come, knowing what the next generations are going to do, I think is super insightful for all of us.
Absolutely. So now let's dive into our 5 questions, starting with you, Dylan. What's your personal favorite data-driven story you often revert to, the one that always lands, no matter the audience?
I think again, looking into my compliance background, a key thing that I've always focused on is capacity uplift. That's truly about creating engaging learning that actually makes a difference. The converse of that is obviously sheep dipping, just giving everyone the same piece of learning, which, yes, it ticks a box of meeting compliance requirements, but does that really create learner engagement? So I always look at capacity uplift when I'm talking to clients, and a key part of that is, if you invest $1, I'd expect you to save $10. It's that kind of thing that you can actually create a advantage of saving your business money in that investment, which you can actually put back straight into the, to the business themselves. If you're working something like a call center, you're saving seconds off the time that people are off the floor. That is a massive financial benefit to a company. So you could be, with a good sized company, you're probably making about $5 to $10 million of saving per quarter just by investing in engaging training. And I think that's the key thing we need to focus on. You invest, you get the back out of it. And, all through my career, if we go back to the 80s when I was a teenager, there was a book that came out by Steve Jackson, called a fighting fantasy book. And that was about you setting your own learner journey. And I think as people in this profession, we have to allow the learners that we are responsible for, and I'll highlight that point again, responsible for, to give them that proper learner journey as well. Let them experience what they need to experience. Let them understand what they need to learn, and be it all about them. And in learning, sometimes we fail to do that. The learner cycle has to start with the learner. And then through that, we can create efficiencies. We can create that capacity uplift. As I said, that's where you're going to get that 5 to 10 million uplift in a good size organization, which you can now put back into be more productive for your customers, basically.
Yeah, wonderful. Maybe a related question to that. Now that many organizations decide for Cornerstone to check a box, like you put it, especially around compliance training. But Che, there's also a huge catalog now from Cornerstone with its own great training and portfolio. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, number one, I couldn't agree with Dylan more. One of the things that can happen in some of these conversations is the learner comes at the bottom of the list. And my own ethos is the learner should be front and center and at the top of the list when we look to solve the challenges. Because if we ignore that, we do so at our peril. We're already seeing statistics and data coming back that in the rush of every business to talk about, well, AI is just going to, solve this for me. Employees are starting to feel a little bit left behind, whereas they should feel empowered by it. AI is going to drive their future and make them more productive and happier and better in doing their roles. But as to what Cornerstone does with the Galaxy platform, in bringing together, yes, the compliance play of the learning management system, but also the learner engagement piece with the learning experience platform is really critical and key. This ability to go from the top down, the organization saying, you've got to take these qualifications to do this job on Monday morning. Well, that's going to get you some data. And that's where when people look at their monthly average user numbers, they go, well, we've got these peaks when we send out the compliance training, and hands up who enjoys compliance training, right? We do it because we kind of have to. But if you really want to look at engagement, then you've got to spin that round and start to encourage a culture of self-directed learning, of people being able to go in and drive their own learning and skilling for their own future. And that's going to be hugely important as organizations face the challenges that we do now. The pace of change is faster than it's ever been. Businesses are rushing to keep up and struggling quite often. And the skills gap is opening. So if we empower our employees and our colleagues in our organizations to do some of that driving of the closing of the skills gap themselves, not only will the organization benefit, but they're going to be happier people because they feel like they're being better equipped and supported to tackle those challenges.
Yeah, often a question that comes up in our conversations, and I also saw this at the recent Cornerstone event where somebody on stage presented that they increased the time to learn per year per employee to 7 hours. And I was just thinking, only 1 day of learning per year? I mean, I get so bored when I don't learn anything new every day. So what is your answer to clients to make room for learning in the first place?
Well, maybe I'll take that first then. So I want to go back to the last point Shay made about compliance training. We take it because we have to. Yes. But I still feel that if we put out compliance learning that has that experience of creating learner fatigue, creating learner annoyance, and I'm paraphrasing a bit further beyond this, I think we failed. I think if we really put out learning, compliance learning that is written by lawyers for lawyers, but given to the general population in an institution like a bank, we've missed the goal completely. Because that's not engaging. We are literally, again, going back to ticking a box. Well, we have to throw that paradigm away and say, we are here to learn. And that is our job, to teach in many ways. And that's always what I took when I was the head of learning at compliance and a number of banks. I'd always take the position of, I'm here to teach, not to protect. And by teaching, you are protecting in a better way because you're creating that engagement, you're creating that learning. And that's why I always have focused learning at the person in operations, the person on the front office, the person in legal, person in compliance, because then you truly are making a fundamental difference. And I think that's the key thing that we need to achieve in learning. And if we do that, then we're moving away from learner fatigue. We're creating engagement. We're creating actually benefit, hopefully, to the individuals and also to our customers, the ultimate people we're training for, because compliance training is to protect our customers if we're in a bank, for example. So we've got to move to that kind of situation where learning goes beyond just ticking a box. And back to the 7 hours, yes, that's unacceptable. But that's also a thing we need to consider about is this push or pull training as well. And, that's where we have to move. What is an LMS? It's a database to record training and the date and pushing. And the other side of it we've not talked about is the LXP. The learner experience is about finding that ability to provide that additional training, creating the training that we also used to have around the water cooler. If we now live in an environment where the water cooler doesn't exist anymore because we're working remote, the learning experience platform becomes much more important in actually pulling people back into learning and actually helping learners find the things that in real time learning, the things they need to do their jobs. So 7 hours is not a badge of honor. I agree. It should be something you want to discuss further and say, let's talk about capacity uplift. Let's create engagement in learning and give the right learning to the right people at the right time and let them take it any time they want. That's another fundamental thing we've had. Now we've got remote workers. You can allow people to take work away from their desks because they're not at necessarily a desk in a bank as a cashier. So we have so much flexibility now. And post-pandemic, the environment changed dramatically for learning. We've moved to programs now that were completely virtual, which previously were, 100% classrooms. And still getting great returns on investment, still getting 4.8, out of 5 for our learners by doing the virtual experience. So we've got the technology now to do this. With AI coming in as well, we can be much more focused in our learning. We can have coaching via AI. We've got to use this technology, and 7 hours, no, in my mind, is not acceptable.
So again, I completely agree with Dylan, as you would expect. And it's one of the key things. Dylan's brought a lot of things into that conversation there, is why Cornerstone moved from being an LMS vendor into Cornerstone Galaxy, where we have learn and elevate and transform. And learn is bringing together into one platform both what would have been the core LMS technologies with the learning experience platform, but then also things like a digital adoption platform to help people get things done and an immersive platform, because modality is key in this as well. I go back to the point about the 5 generations in the workplace. Personally, I like to read a big detailed PDF. I like to have a podcast when I'm walking around, but we're transforming many of these areas of learning and skilling and even compliance training by putting this into immersive deliveries, which can be consumed on screen or in a headset. But I go back to my point earlier, and I know, Dylan, one of the things we talked about in the sessions is the data behind all of this. How do organizations understand? Are they moving the needle? Are they transforming it? And to be fair, I'll call it out. I think saying 7 hours is neither here nor there. Could be 5 hours, could be 55 hours. But unless it's achieving and solving the problems you're trying to solve, well, the number's null and void. It doesn't tell you anything. Everybody in the business took 7 hours of learning. Well, great. What are you going to do with that? Are they more effective? Are they happier in their roles? Are they solving problems in the business? And I think that's where, again, as we've brought together the Learn platform and indeed the data analytics that we're able to look at, you can go looking for data that can really tell you what's going on in the business. So to the point, 7 hours training, great. And someone delivered it and all the rest of it. But what do people need? What are they searching for? What are the skills people are looking for? Who are the people in the business they'd like to be mentored by? What's the content they're consuming? And what are the gaps? We often see when we talk to clients that they say, well, I've got this many monthly active users. Okay, well, let's drill underneath. How would we make that go up, right? If that's going to be our measure, the amount of time people spend in learning and skilling, well, if they're only spending this amount, maybe that's because we're not providing the things that they want to provide. And, AI plays a huge part of this. And indeed, Cornerstone is rolling out AI fundamentals as content that will go out free to every Cornerstone customer to help them with everybody in their business, from having the very basics through to the very advanced, for precisely that reason, to help, again, drive that engagement. But when you can look at the data and say, okay, we've gone from this world of 7 hours, tick the box, through to looking and saying, well, okay, well, how comes everyone in our business is searching for content in this area, yet we're not providing any? How comes whenever anybody uses user-generated content tools to produce a video or a document and shares that within an academy, that's getting all of these likes, comments, responses, and commentary on it? Well, that's something we should look at. And the data's there. That's the criticality of it. Some of this, and again, I go back to the great work we do with many of our Cornerstone partners, and NIIT is a leading example of this. There's an element of business transformation that comes alongside rolling out these technologies. If you want to drive engagement, if you want to really tackle these challenges, Yes, the technology is a big part of that, but you've got to engender a culture of creating, of sharing, of commenting, of wanting to learn. And most important is curiosity. We're all people, I bet, without even thinking about it, all of us on this call spend an hour or so every day learning. I know I do, and I've done this 25 years, especially with the advents and the pace at which Cornerstone is moving with AI across the platform. Every day I try and carve out an hour in the morning. I do a little bit in the evening because I'm curious. And that's the big thing we need to inspire people with, is that curiosity to drive. And then if we facilitate that with the great tools that we've got, that's when we can really start to move the needle.
Absolutely. I think it really comes down to creating this learning culture from start to finish to, spark this curiosity. Coming to question number 2, and I think, Che, you somewhat tapped into it already with what you just said, but let's get a bit more practical. Imagine you're presented with a dashboard full of numbers. What is your first instinct, or where do you start? How does your thought process look like? Can we steal something from your approach?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And we did touch on it a little bit. So beyond the obvious, which is, you look for the outliers, right? A long part of my background was in assessment, on-screen tests and exams. So my natural inclination is to look at the numbers and go, well, where is there a bump? Where's there something that's different? Doesn't need to be negative or positive, but it's just outlier of what we would have expected from the trends. But then also, is the data I'm looking at actually telling me something useful? So again, monthly active users, 7 hours in a year. Well, it's not really telling me anything beyond that checkbox. What I want to get into is, okay, if I look at the company strategy and we say, okay, well, there's ABC, been dictated, that's what we're trying to achieve as a company. I want to go looking for the data that's going to align with that. Now, that could be something along the lines of, well, what's our time to impact and time to value for new hires? Okay. And can we drill down to that kind of data? If we think we look at our business and say, well, we've got a skills gap, right? We're trying to hire for jobs now that we didn't have in the company 2 years ago. Well, yes, you can identify the skills gap. You can then start to look at how you provision to fill that gap. But what's coming down the pipe? What's the skills data that I need to know to look forwards 2 years and understand what are the roles I'm going to need to hire in the future, given the velocity of change currently? And I think, it's something we can all be guilty of it. You fall into a rut of looking at the same dashboards every week and saying, right, well, we achieved our 7 hours, right? So happy days, everyone, big pat on the back and off we go. But the reality of it is things will move past you if you do that. And you should be reevaluating the data you're looking at on a regular basis to say, is it actually telling us something useful that we can action? And if it isn't, then we're probably looking at the wrong data.
Wonderful. Dylan, can you share a moment when great data failed because the story didn't land, or quite the opposite, when weak data was carried way too far because the story was just great?
Just on to Shay's point as well, I think, data has to tell a story. I think that's a key important thing we need to always achieve. And, back to the 7 hours as well, we need to unpack what was in the 7 hours as well. There might have been 7 hours of the most engaging training in the world. So I don't know. But the reality is, with data, that would tell us at those 7 hours, let's use that example again, how valuable it really was and what it achieved. LMS is for a long time. And I always use that as predictive as well. So what I expect to happen, I could change 5 to 8% of people completing training. If that doesn't happen, I know something failed in the system. So it becomes very predictive, and data has to tell a story. Otherwise, it's completely useless to everyone. And I think that's why certain systems have to push data into Power BI or other into data lakes to actually do the proper analysis. You would hope that the dashboards that you have in your product allows you to get everything you need out of it. But if you're not designed it properly, then it's irrelevant anyway. So the problem I have sometimes when we're looking at systems, and a lot of that comes down to consolidation of systems as well. What are the things that we're trying to achieve? Consolidating 2 systems or moving to a different system when we're like a strategic advisor, sometimes you're missing the goal because you're not understanding what is the strategic goals. So I think that's the key thing to always understand. Don't presume. Try and get the client to go first and let them explain to you what their pain points are. What's their reason for looking to move to another system? What are their reason to say their present system isn't suitable? And I think first understand that. And I think that's where maybe I've gone in with data first, truly understanding the true picture, because the decision might not be the system isn't suitable, it could be the system is too expensive. And that's the metric you need to focus on. And rather than focusing on this will be an increase of admin as you move to the new system. And again, some of these consequences as well. You may be looking to make something move for a cheaper system. But to do that, there's also downstream impacts that need to be looked at. So, for example, we need more admins. What are the workarounds? What are your present, tech stack, and how those will be impacted by this change? And I think you've got to look at that whole bigger picture. And sometimes we're too, one-dimensional, and we need to be much more focused in doing that. So, I think I'd say, in short, understand the problem and then allow the data to help you storytell to the right position, rather than going with data first, saying, moving is a bad idea because. Well, first find out why do I want to move. And I think that's a key thing that we try and do. So then the data can apply. And that's where I think things have failed before, going at the wrong point.
I think this is also what we try to do when clients approach us. We try to absorb their context to the fullest, understanding when do people access training and how. We just had a client where people had to look at Cornerstone for recipes while they cook those meals in the kitchen. So there are very different context options somebody can be in consume training. So we need to be aware of the fact, is it loud? Is it noisy? How much time do they have? So everything is relevant. And to your point, the client need to tell you the pain point first, and then you go deeper into what they actually need and what could help them.
Yeah, and I think the most important thing that, many people offering strategic advice do, we've got to listen. Don't push our own agenda. The key thing that I see where things go wrong is where people don't listen to the client and understand where they're coming from, what their problems are. Obviously, there's navigation through that as well. So, for example, they'll say, well, we don't want to use this system because it's slow. So my question would be, how is it slow? Let's unpack that. Let's understand why that is causing you problems. Is it really, truthfully, an issue of slowness of the system, or is it an interpretation issue? I don't know, but let's understand that. And I think that's the key thing, to listen and then really get perspective of the client. What are their drivers? Why do they want to do this? And the best thing about being a strategist is we can give them examples from multiple different, clients in the same area as them. So if it's in a pharma space, multiple pharma clients, we can say, well, it's not working for you here, but it's working these other 5 pharma companies. The reason it's working there is because X, and here's the data to support that. So I think where data fails is when we don't listen. And then once we understand, we can use the data for success.
Yeah, I think this covers the beautiful essence that even with technology around all of that, we still have people on both sides who need to communicate to ultimately create something great together. So I really like that. I started my career in HR software almost 25 years ago, and from many different perspectives, I've seen HR teams are often made of the most kind of humble people, always trying to do good for others. But I've also seen how hard it can be for them to really prove their value to the business. Che, what's your advice to L&D teams, to HR who struggle to turn platform data into something that actually influences leadership decisions?
Yeah, it's a really good point. And it does come back to what Dylan said. And I always, whenever someone talks about listening to customers, right at the start of my sales career, someone said to me, you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, and you should use them in that ratio. And it's just resonated because it's very true. You can rush in. And for our colleagues that are trying to demonstrate the value of what they're doing, standing, what's the business facing as challenges? What are we there to solve for? And I'm sorry, but it isn't just 7 hours a year. That may be an overarching number, but there's an objective at the end of that. And understanding those and aligning with the corporate strategies and being able to deliver value against those is clearly the objective, right? Then it becomes a no-brainer. When you can say, we've onboarded people faster, their time to impact, time to value has come down dramatically, therefore the new people we bring in, they're much thing. Or we've had to undergo a transformation, as we saw many organizations, and we've had to move all these engineers from going out and screwing satellites on the side of a building to running high-tech fiber into the house, and we've taken the training from here to here. Those kinds of things are really transformational. And when you look at the way that things like AI is transforming every business, if you can say we've brought people's competence around AI from here to here, we've got people engaged on doing that and driving it, these are valuable things you can use. Now, the reality of it is we live in a more compliance-driven world, not a less compliance-driven world. So all of that data is still super important. It's not complete value, any of that. But as you look forwards, and Dylan kind of touched on this earlier, now that compliance thing should just be the springboard to kick you off to go after these other areas. So that in addition to that, you inspire the inquisitiveness of people to want to continue to drive. Also, the big ability to get people to create themselves, to use things like user-generated content tools to start to bring in and make content that engages with their colleagues and solves problems as well, because they see it. That's a huge part of all of this. But to come around to your question, when HR teams and learning teams look at this data and there's a sea of it available to us, there's a multiple of dashboards. And then, as Dylan said, you've got APIs that expose all this to BI tools. Very simple. Step back and say, what is the problem we're trying to solve here? And then let's find the data that talks to that problem. Don't worry about the dashboards that you've got and the reports that you've got, because the reality of it is now you can get access to pretty much everything. And then from there, then decide, okay, well, this is the problem. Therefore, this data is going to articulate how we're solving that problem. And if you do it that way round, rather than saying, well, I want 10 reports that tell me this, this, and this, we've got more to work with. For us as technologists and for organizations like NIIT that are going to consult, they're going to be able to walk you through to how you get to the data that tells that story. And then that team can go to the board and say, look, this is what we're doing. You set these out as challenges. As a company strategy, we needed to tackle these things. And here's a story that talks to you with data that shows how we're solving that.
Beautiful. Dylan, would you like to add something?
Yeah, so I think, HR can be very fragmented. You'll have HR tech, you'll have traditional HR, you have the talent team, the learning team. If you treat, many of them as bricks, the reality is with the technology, it can be the mortar that holds all those together and really brings them together into now a strong foundation that can actually be built upon. And data analytics is another group that sometimes don't really have much of a voice, maybe not even have a budget. And, they need to be out to buy, predictive tools that allow them to do proper data analysis. You look at air traffic controllers in the United States, for example, and not just the United States, in Canada, in the UK, Europe as well. There's not enough of them. What is that doing? It's meaning that airports now are reducing the number of flights coming in. And the problem is so bad that they can't catch up to create enough air traffic controllers to cover the amount of flights that happen today. And this is a thing that's been happening for 40 years, this problem. But if you had the ability to predict that, to understand it, to actually now know that the churn rate of number of staff, so it takes 5 years for an air traffic controller, let's say, at the end of that 5 years, maybe 10% have reached that point. And then you've got the fact, did that take into account retirement over that period as well? Then you throw in the increase of retirement that happened post-pandemic as well, and people getting different kinds of jobs. So you've literally got a fundamental problem that how could HR ever predict that? They never could. They don't have a crystal ball. But with the data analytics tools that do exist today, we can start thinking about that. And a word we haven't used much yet today, skills. Again, we need tools that identify what are the skills we need, not today, but what we need in 5 years. How we can actually build out those skills to ensure that we are going to be relevant in 5 years' time as an institution. And that's where I think, the technology, that we're talking about today, getting these HR departments to understand that technology, and many of them are leading that technology to be fair to them. But we've got to bring the technologists together. We've got to bring the HR teams together, data analytics together, and really create that forum where we can have that discussion. And then the skills taxonomies. We've got to be able to build skills taxonomies fast. We can't take 5 years to build a skills taxonomy, because at the end of the 5-year period, it's redundant in what we've built. It's a bit like painting a bridge. We can't get to the end of the bridge and then walk back and start again. We have to literally start from both ends of the bridge and meet in the middle, and have constantly the ability to find better ways of not painting the bridge and be that reactive. And I think with what's coming in now in the technology, and there's some great, providers out there that, working very strongly throughout the market, that they have to be part of any ecosystem that we have now. Skills has to be front and center. As I said, an LMS in many ways is a database. It's the skills that go into that database. The talent team need to be involved in that process as well, for succession planning, for performance management, and all of these things need to cover. And I think, if anything, I left HR 8 years ago. I would love to be back in HR department again now, because the things they have to handle today are unprecedented in the careers of HR. The speed they have to operate in, and only by operating at that speed are they able to give what the business needs. And I think that's the thing, that the technology exists. We have to work with these HR teams and they will deliver for the business. I have no doubt the HR teams of today will deliver, but will have to do that with the technology that exists and technology that doesn't exist yet, that's still in development. This is how fast it's developing at the moment. HR tech, I'm sure, was like exploding about skills this year, because the fundamental thing is skills are the be all and end all. We started a long time ago with job descriptions and CVs. These things now need to move much faster than that. You need to find the skill within that resume that makes them suitable for the job that you need to have in 2 years. And we need to make sure the universities can operate at that pace as well, that they are looking at providing the skills that when I come out of a 5-year degree, I have skills that are actually now valuable to the job I have. And that's even more important with AI taking away graduates' jobs. How do we make sure, and if you take graduates' jobs away, what happens then? How do people move up into middle management if there's no one coming up through the graduate ranks? So AI has bring many positive things to the industry, but also negative. But at the end of the day, data is going to be paramount in how HR operates and predicts. And it's all about prediction in my mind, in regards of skills, what we need and how we grow and how we can change in such a changing environment. You talk about your daughters. What will it be like when they enter the workforce? Probably won't look like it is today. It'll change once again. The pandemic had such fundamental changes in how we operate. What's going to be that next major change that changes it for their careers in the future?
Yeah, I completely agree, Dylan. And you're right. I mean, we did steer a little clear of the skills conversation as part of this today, mainly because we wanted to kind of talk data, but skills is absolutely fundamental to this. So, with what we're doing at Cornerstone with our skills intelligence platform that allows you to do everything from automating the building of your job architecture, so it goes from years to do this down to a very short period of time, but also to get those insights around, well, what are the skills we got? What are the skills we think we need? How do we bridge that skills gap? And then using the Learn platform to bridge that. That's one part of the story. But also the skills intelligence is looking forwards, and it's scraping data from patent filings, job boards, recruitment, all these things to come together and say, right, well, you're in this industry. This is what you should be looking at. These are the skills that are going to blindside you. And out of that conversation comes another whole piece about, well, then how do we tackle it? And we released a white paper recently, the buy, build, borrow, or bot, because you've got those opportunities that, do we try and hire that talent to bridge that skills gap? Do we build it? Look at reskilling and retraining everybody and upskilling and uptraining them to tackle that? Do we look at a gig culture internally? Certainly here at Cornerstone, we do a lot of this, of bringing together. I'm super lucky to work with some amazingly talented people from different parts of the business brought together to work on gigs to make things go faster is great. And then there's a bunch of stuff that can just be automated with these AI bots. And then that allows us to, clear some of the noise away and focus on the more productive things to grow what we do. So, yeah, I agree. Skills is the language of every conversation that we have now. And it is without doubt the biggest challenge that organizations are looking to face. But, you should not be spending 2 years building a skills ontology. That's just crazy. And I've always been of the viewpoint, yes, building these ontologies, and every business thinks they've got a skills ontology that has to be different than everybody else's. But if you just wait to build this stuff, you'll miss the boat. You can actually do a lot of stuff that will get you data today of what's going on in your organization. It's going to help you address that architecture and ontology challenge and help businesses solve problems faster.
Yeah, and I think as an organization, you shouldn't get perfect in the way of good enough. Just start somewhere to make progress, because there will never be a perfect set in stone skills ontology, because it's ever changing. There's no definite time or date where it's set in stone.
One very key thing in all of that, and we see this conversation regularly about, where do skills live in the organization? Should it live over here as one fixed thing? Should it live over here as a more dynamic thing? And certainly the HR and L&D teams are key in that discussion and conversation, for sure, in helping make sure that what decisions are made align with corporate strategy and the goals of our colleagues and employees, and that's going to make us be more effective in an organization. So they're absolutely key in that conversation.
And to what you said, Dylan, we have a similar situation here in Berlin when a couple of years ago, there weren't enough schools and kindergartens for the next generation. So everything was super packed and full. Classrooms were super full. So the kids had a hard time to learn. Now, all of a sudden, it has changed and we have too much space in those kindergartens and schools. It feels like the processes are just taking so much time, so we can't react on the actual changes happening. And I think, especially when we look at skills, some of it could also be applied to universities, kindergarten, schools, and so on, to help train teachers. Everything is so connected, and HR is under pressure, being this traditional department now being under fire for being the crucial part of every organization to really keep the pace up with all the technology advancements out there. Let's bring it home for our final, almost philosophical question now. I want you to picture the three of us sitting around a campfire at night, clear sky above us. We can almost see the Cornerstone galaxy shimmering up there. So before humanity had any form of reliable documentation, we heavily relied on what our ancestors told us sitting by the fire to teach, to warn, to pass on wisdom. And looking ahead as platforms, dashboards, and especially AI continues to evolve, what role will human storytelling play to make sense of it all? Dylan, would you like to go first?
I guess a lot of social media platforms are doing that storytelling on a constant basis. I think, the way that we learnt is changing. Before, when I used to fix a toilet, I'd call my dad and ask him. Now I'd use YouTube. But I hope that the fireplace never disappears. I used to be a scout leader, and that was the most fun thing I used to do, in an evening, was sit around the fire and share stories and teach the youth, as they're coming through. So I'm hoping that method of teaching will continue. I enjoyed being part of that, working with the scouts and doing that. And I think that's a great way that we'll continue to do that. But I guess now we won't have to paint this on cave walls or so forth. We'll have much better ways of passing on that information. Yeah, I just hope it never goes away. I hope that still is a thing that we can do, with our children and with, other people's children we're doing through like a scout movement or something else. So we can continue to learn in that most pleasant manner.
What about you, Che?
Yeah, great question, by the way, to be clear. I mean, look, that oral tradition has lasted as long as there's been people. But what we can learn from it is that we could be sat around this fire, and those who tell a good story, people pay attention, they're engaged by it, they enjoy it, they contribute to it. And if you didn't tell a good story, well, you didn't get anything to eat and you went to the next village, try it up there and see if you could be more engaging there than you were at the first fireside. And I'm pretty sure that, a few firesides with no food made you up your game, either that or you gave up storytelling. But to some degree, we can look at the self-same thing with what we're doing with learning and skilling today. Yes, the modalities are different, and boy, is it amazing. We've never had such a wide range of modalities. As I say, I like a PDF and a podcast. Others like my daughter learned Chinese to speak to another child at school through Duolingo, a little app on her phone, to, the amazing immersive content that people like NIIT produce and we have as part of our platform. So the modality's there, but at the heart of it is still that storytelling tradition. It's got to be engaging. Otherwise, people will just not take part in it. And again, come back to your data analytics. You can look at that content and work out, well, this is the stuff that is engaging people and this is the stuff that isn't. And then you can make decisions based upon it. All I think, and I think Dylan said it, things like YouTube and TikTok and whichever other platform people are using just shows us that tradition's stronger than ever. People still love to be engaged and love a good story. And if we tell it right, then we will get people wanting to come and consume it. And as we face these business challenges, it's something to be learned. That's for sure. You guys will all know, I bet if I asked you, you could all tell me the best TED Talk you've ever seen, right? Because somebody went on and did an amazing job on how they told the story, and that really drew you in. And I don't know do you guys remember The Joy of Stats? The guy who produced that, I may send it round, but somebody was talking to me and I just remembered this guy, this doctor, and forgive me, I'm not prepped, but Joy of Stats was Hans Rosling. I just quickly searched while we were talking. But I was on a call with somebody and they were talking about how some stats had been misinterpreted in a meeting. And I just instantly went back to his Joy of Stats presentation because that was his point. And it's just to say that these stories really resonate and stay with you when someone is compelling in how they position it. So yeah, I don't think it will go away, Rob. Like you guys, I like the outdoors. I like a campfire with my buddies and sitting around and telling some stories and things. I think that's really powerful and I don't think it will go away. And if anything, I think we all feel better for it, unplugging and doing that once in a while and enjoy it more so perhaps than we've ever done.
And I think conferences today, you always still have a fireside chat. I've been to a conference that doesn't have one called the Fireside Chats. You bring that into the conference room. And I think that is another key point where you do go to conferences where the clients are allowed to speak to the customers of that vendor. I think those are the best presentations in a way, because you're getting the experience of using that product by someone who's using it. And I think that's the best way to learn. I don't see this Fireside Chat going away, be it actually at a fireside or in a conference hall. These things will continue, storytelling will continue, and this is how we learn best, by listening to others.
Perfect. No, well, great. All good things need to come to an end, even our cute little fireside chat here. So thanks again to both of you. This has been packed with takeaways and metaphors to remember. And if you're watching and trying this at home, making your data actually do something in the room, this is your playbook. Now, there's only one thing left for me to do, to roll out the green carpet for you. What shall be your famous last words?
Keep on learning.
Stay inquisitive, which is much the same thing.
Wonderful. Then thank you, gentlemen. This was a delight. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks so much.
Thank you both. Speak to you soon.
Bye.
Take care.